Your pants?
What's that?
Soup. Yeah, the soup.
Maybe. I might have some mustard and my pants are not the
It was
cleanest.
just so good.
But,
okay.
Hi guys. Today we're going to be thinking about all things Georgian Bay, as we can see here. And I will admit, also beyond Georgian Bay a little bit too. I cannot lie. I did think we were going to go to Muskoka when we first planned this, and it turns out we're pretty far away from Muskoka. So here, right here is where we are. So again, we're at the little cottage right here, looking out into the bay here. So we were pointing out with me and Mark and Dad, we're looking at when you look out into the distance here, you're actually looking at, I think this is called Christian Island?
Yeah.
You're looking at a Christian Island, which is owned by the Monk family. Like you look right into there, and then maybe you can see off into the distance.
It's so big.
But so here's where we are. That's around where Muskoka is. So it's a pretty long way away. Like you're almost as far away from Toronto as you are from Muskoka here.
We're
so,
the lower arrow?
we are right here. We're the lower arrow, whereas Muskoka is way over there. So we're gonna be talking about Georgian Bay itself, the land around it, also a bit about Algonquin Park, and then the sort of the larger Canadian historical context that Georgian Bay exists within. And yeah, I'm going to throw in some Algonquin, because when I was doing some digging here, I found out Algonquin is the oldest provincial park, national park, designated park in Canada. And it was, does anyone want to guess the year that Algonquin Park was made into an official reserve, like an official environmental reserve?
1823.
Sooner, closer to us, earlier than 1921. Any other guesses? A couple more guesses.
1907.
You're getting closer and closer now.
1900.
Okay, very close again. It was 1893,
Oh, shit.
and we'll get into some of the history, but it's essentially the logging and the lumber trade was getting more and more intensive in the 1870s, 1880s. There was more and more demands in the States, and they were running out of their own logs. So loggers were pushing farther and farther north from Peterborough and all those towns, right, into Algonquin. And so the Ontario government had a very hard choice to make. And so they just said, okay, this land is going to be designated, as a logging, not a logging-free zone, but like a less logging-intensive zone. So anyway, we're going to be talking a little bit of that. And one of the people that were on the board of the Algonquin Park in its very first session was a guy named James Dixon. So maybe we have some relations. He wrote a book called Camping in the Muskoka Region. My computer's having a little bit of a hissy fit. But he wrote a book in 1886 called Camping in the Muskoka Region, and I think it sold decently well at its time. And I read a chapter of it, and it was quite well done. So yeah, so maybe we have some history in these parts.
Anybody here work near a logging camp?
Anybody?
That was one of my questions, but I'll ask you later.
You go, please ask me now.
Okay, no, anything in there about Cook's Camp, Lumber Camp?
Anything in what? Sorry.
That's been many years there.
Anything in my research into so this was written in 1886. So I didn't get anything about Cook's Camp. Cook's Camp probably comes after 1886. I imagine.
This was like 10 miles into the Algonquin Park gates.
Oh yeah.
So it was right in the center.
Yeah, so there has been and still is logging in Algonquin Park,
Yeah.
but a good amount of Algonquin is set aside to not be logged.
Yeah.
But it's more tightly managed. There's a whole environmental zone, like forestry zone called Algonquin Zone, and it's a special region, different than other forestry management zones.
Right.
To get into the technical details. But yeah, so today we're not talking about Algonquin as much. We're talking about Georgian Bay, and this bay is, as old as geological time. As old, it's very, very old, and to me, it's very special for many reasons beyond humanity. It's very interesting for its different components. So up here, so this map is from the 17th century, and I believe this is in either French or like some of this is in French or even Latin, and so. If you go north, right? If you go north from Georgian Bay, so north here is this way, you start getting up into the rocky areas, into the more harsh regions, right? Where underneath the ground is all bedrock. So that's more of here. But then when you get south and south in Georgian Bay, you eventually reach areas where you have softer ground. You have sandy. You have more land that's hospitable to agriculture. And so again, this map is obviously not geographically accurate, but so this is kind of the general region, and we're around here.
What was it? Shale rock or Craig Leaf that blew up? What's that called? That rock?
Shale.
Shale.
Well, it's, what is it? What
What
kind of
was
stone?
that stone called?
Shale?
Shale.
Slate.
That blew up.
Is that a type of rock?
It's
It
in
blew
Craig
up.
Leaf, and it's all down into the Georgian Bay, and
I see.
And that's how the Indians started fires.
Yes.
Yeah.
Slate rock, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've always kind of been obsessed with the Canadian Shield. I've worked there for many summers now. And so it's interesting to me what the Canadian Shield has meant to people represented. Like in Canadian history, it's acted as a barrier. To some people, it's been like a zone of transportation, a highway. It's something for some people, it's been something to wonder at, to paint. Like famously in Canada, we have many artists, such as the Group of Seven, who have painted many wonders. Okay, here it is. Yeah, I've painted many wonders around these parts, around the bay. So there's a ton of history, and so today I'm going to explore a lot of the early history, less so the 20th century history, because maybe we're more familiar with that. There's been many books written about Georgian Bay. I take a lot of the information we're talking about from this book, and it's funny because the title is The Sixth Great Lake, and it raises the question. This is kind of the joke, like why is Georgian Bay not considered a lake? It has almost as big of a strait connecting it to Lake Huron as Lake Michigan does to Lake Huron. So it's funny to me, you could conceive Georgian Bay as being a lake
It doesn't
as well.
sound as nice though.
It
Georgian
doesn't.
Bay
You're
sounds
right.
better than Georgian Lake.
It also is a bay, technically speaking, but you could also view Lake Michigan then as just being a big bay as well.
What
Yeah.
feeds Georgian Bay?
Both into Lake Huron and then also, as we're going to be talking about in a bit, many river systems coming down from southern Ontario and from northern Ontario as well, and it all feeds into Georgian Bay.
Donald could call it Trump Lake.
Yeah, that's right.
He could, so that's another reason why we gotta stay a sovereign country. Yes, indeed. So just another reason we're gonna avoid
It's
it.
not that far from the States.
So, I want to, because this is really interesting to me, I'm very interested in how geological history interrelates to human history, like human geography. And so we should look at Georgian Bay in terms of a larger system to understand Canadian history, okay? So we had does anyone know the name of this river? Very famous river.
St.
The
Lawrence.
St. Lawrence River, of course. I know you guys have been on tours of the St. Lawrence. One day I hope to maybe canoe down it. So here is the St. Lawrence, and it goes into the Atlantic Ocean, right? So here's Georgian Bay. How did people before the advent of modern technology, before rail, before even the steamship, right? How did people before canals? How did people get to Georgian Bay? Well, the main route would be paddle a little bit against the grain because again the river's going into the Atlantic Ocean. So you paddle into the St. Lawrence, and then, does anyone know the name of this river? Well,
Sagnell?
no,
Severn?
No, Severn's a little farther down. So you have St. Lawrence, and then this is a really famous river. It passes a city that everybody will know. This is a city that everyone will know. What's that?
Grand River.
Trois.
No.
Saint-Laurent.
No, Trois-Rivières is a city in
New
Quebec.
Brunswick.
There's a New Brunswick's over there. So I'll give you a hint, okay?
Madawaska?
I'll give you a hint. This city is bilingual. It's the capital of Canada.
Oh!
And it shares the name of the river. The Ottawa River. The Ottawa River. And the Ottawa River, again, is
my
famous.
God.
So the Ottawa River is called a tributary. So a tributary is a river that feeds another river going out into a larger body of water. So the St. Lawrence goes out into the Atlantic Ocean, and the Ottawa River feeds the St. Lawrence at Montreal. So here's Montreal. At Montreal, the Ottawa River and the St. Lawrence meet. And this was very important for Canadian history. This is why Montreal was so important, because it fed both rivers. And the rivers were the highway systems of Canada. And so in here, you get the Ottawa River, and then you can go down into like the French River, the Severn River, but eventually you hit what's called the height of land, right? So here is where travelers would have to get out of their canoe and portage. And is that my next? I guess. And that's why portaging is so important in Canadian history.
Is that you?
It looks like
That
Grandpa.
That could be Grandpa. Unfortunately, it's a picture I got from the internet.
It looks like Grandpa.
It very well could be Grandpa.
Just like him.
The way
And,
he stands, or
and so
His red canoe.
I think this can tell us a lot about Canadian history, like why portaging has been such a big part of it, because it was literally a necessity to get from the river that was going to take you to Georgian Bay. You would literally have to get off your canoe and walk it out to get to a river that eventually lead you to it. So you can go here. There's Lake Nipissing here, and there's Lake Simcoe there, and then you have to portage a little bit after getting to them, and then from there you can go into Georgian Bay. And after you get to Georgian Bay, you have the whole Great Lakes system you can go to, and from there you can get to the Mississippi River in America, and it's a whole highway system. And so, but before the railway was invented, like this was the grid. Like forget the 401, forget the 400 series, right? Like these were the highways of Canada. And so I find this history like extremely interesting. And so here's another way of viewing the country. And I didn't really quite know that the geology was like this. So here, going up to the Canadian Shield, you have what's called the Haliburton Highlands. So here is a high ground there, and the rivers flow into Georgian Bay from the high ground. Here, does anyone know what this is right here? This edge here.
Escarpment.
The escarpment. This is the Niagara Escarpment right there. So you'll see it actually says Dundas Valley because Dundas is so important for this geology.
Awesome.
It says Dundas here. So Niagara Escarpment curves around Dundas, and then does this big bowl, comes up all the way, and then here we are. And so the escarpment ends like just that way to us and flows into Georgian Bay here. But through this area here, from Oakville, and then all the way like from Lake Ontario, it stays shallow. You have more shallow land, and so you can understand then from looking at this why like Toronto would have been an important city, because you could get to and from Lake Simcoe.
Is it correct to say that there was a time in geological history where that was all water right through there? So if the Lake Ontario got higher, it could literally flood that entire.
If there was a massive, if water levels rise to that degree, then that would be the first
which
area.
we're losing water, which probably won't happen.
Yeah. So if, for example, water levels did rise, but you say it's not likely. If they did, this would be the first area to get underwater. Like these areas are higher. So, but yeah, of course, geological history has evolved over millions of years. Like 15,000 years ago, this was glacier. This was
I was
frozen
just
up.
going to. You can almost, when you can't see very well, you can see it could almost be a glacier.
Yes.
Coffee's ready, I think. If you want.
Oh yeah, you go ahead. Feel free to go. So this is some of the geological history that.
So what's the elevation difference between the top and the Laurentian Trough?
So we have about 500 meters above sea level here, and then around here would be about 100 to 50. So about 400 meters.
Wow.
Which isn't that much comparatively to like when you get to like Central Asia and the Himalayas. Like it's very little compared to that.
But still, 400 meters, like
Still a lot.
Well, just think of
Still a
Niagara
lot.
Falls and
that's
the
quite a
drop.
bit.
What
Well,
is that?
that's not 400 meters.
It's probably less.
Like,
Yeah.
The escarpment, when I think of the escarpment, I think of maybe like 150 meters,
Yeah.
if that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, according to this map, it's higher. So
Well, I guess because it's like there's one drop and then it probably like gradually goes down.
yeah, it is a gradual decline.
Well, I think Mount St. Louis, I'm not sure, but when it originally was there, I think it was 500 elevation.
Where was Mount St. Louis?
I think it was
That's,
500.
Barry?
I'm not sure.
In Barrie. Okay, in Barrie. That's where Mount St. Louis is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's actually a street, maybe you know it, it's called Hurontario Street.
Yeah.
And it runs from I think Mississauga to Collingwood.
Right.
And so that's because it connected Lake Ontario to Georgian Bay through this Laurentian trough. And it was actually built in 1818, which we'll get into that history a little bit.
That's
So
Highway
it was built in
10.
1818.
I love that.
Highway 10?
Yeah.
And the green is the Holland Marsh.
The Holland Marsh is in there. Yes, I still need to go to the Holland Marsh.
Close the door for a reason.
But anyway, so you may be asking a question, okay? Instead of to get to the Great Lakes, why instead of like going through here and having to go through all this portaging, because it's quite a bit of portaging, instead of doing that, why not just go all the way down to St. Lawrence, into Lake Ontario, down to Lake Erie, and then into the Great Lakes? You might be asking, and people might. Does anyone know why you can't do that? There's a bit of a there's a bit of a drop. So from between Lake Ontario and Lake Huron, so here's Niagara Falls here. Between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, there's a pretty big drop, one of the biggest drops in the entire world. And so there are many travelers who made this mistake and did
Are they
not.
still going to Huron and then just go across?
What do you mean, sorry?
Go back? Couldn't they, why do they need to go? Couldn't they go into Huron and then just go
To get to
across?
Huron, you'd have they'd have to portage through Southern Ontario. They'd have to go through.
Right, but
this
that would be
area.
better than portaging across.
No, it's not. It's actually easy. It's easier to portage through here than it is. Through
Well,
here.
because you can have a bunch of like lakes and rivers that get you a good amount of the way through, right?
There's nothing like the Niagara Escarpment is here. Like this is highland, but from what I've read, it's harder to get by boat. It's hard to get across here than across
I think you
there.
have the Madawaska system in there.
The Madawaska system is around here, but
Yeah, so, and the
The river.
Madawaska is a huge system of water.
and it runs. Does it run west to the Madawaska River? Does it run that way?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It runs all the way into the Ottawa River.
Yeah. So it flows. It's tributary for the Ottawa River.
Because
Yeah.
that Severn, Port Severn, that's all connected through there.
Yeah,
Right in that area.
yeah, well, you've got rivers coming out of
Yeah,
there too.
yeah.
All
Yeah.
the Severn rivers.
So the locks are coming into this
And-
too, aren't they?
Yeah, and so again, like you might also think like, okay, like why is it that you could not just like get close to Niagara Falls and then just portage a little bit down? Well, the issue is that there is extreme rapids all the way down the Niagara River. So like after Niagara Falls, you're still going down. Like it's
Yeah.
still a huge fall down from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario. It's a huge drop down.
Yeah.
So it was very hard for travelers to like.
What
to
is the
do this.
elevation? 130 or something like that, I think.
130,
Where does the
130
whirlpool
meters.
come into it?
I'm not sure exactly
The
where, but
drop.
there are bad whirlpools as well.
The drop.
I don't know the exact elevation, but I heard that it was quite steep. Did I have that written down somewhere?
Well, I'm curious.
Yeah, you could look into that.
Yeah.
So again, this is the context for getting to Georgian Bay, and it wasn't easy. So here's around where we are right here, and so there's Meaford there, and there are all these small little rivers that lead into it here all along. It's interesting to view it this way. Like you can see, it's kind of like you can kind of view rivers as like almost like interconnected cells, and like veins going across. They're all connected. It's interesting to view Earth as kind of a life form like this. It almost reminds you of, like biological species like that. I just thought that was interesting there.
Does that say Nagasawaka Bay?
So that is not to Wasaga Bay, and so I'm going to get into the etymology of that.
Okay.
And so here, just one of the last things I'll say just about the geology, is that here's the Niagara Escarpment. The rivers flow into Georgian Bay from there, but then past the Niagara Escarpment this way, the rivers flow into Lake Ontario. This way, they flow into Lake Huron, and then if you get south enough, they eventually flow into Lake Erie. So Southern Ontario is kind of interesting for being it was like a crossroads of many different paths for rivers, in such a small peninsula.
Different elevations, I guess.
Different elevations. Yeah, so it's a cool geography, and it did confuse natives and Europeans alike. It confused a lot of people throughout the years, like this geography. Let's actually. I wanted to. So first, so we're in the Nottawasaga Bay, and you had mentioned. So what is Nottawasaga exactly? What does that mean? Well, this is actually it's a certain word. It's what is it called again? It's a contraction. So these are actually two different words in an Algonquin language. So Nottawa not so Wasaga means like a sandy, beachy area. So I'm translating this weirdly, but it's something like sandy, like bay of some sort. That's what Wasaga means. And actually, that's the same root as Mississauga, like Wasaga. Apparently, they come from similar roots, Mississauga and Wasaga. So that means bay. And then Natua is really interesting, because Natua means enemy. It means like another. It means like someone someone to watch out for, and it's dangerous. So that's in the Algonquin language, and it's interesting because it ties very closely with the sort of history I want to talk about. And so this is just kind of cool. Just before I get to that, so this is Wasaga Beach, and so you have this river kind of running in. I always love this river. It kind of like just flows right in like that.
It's a natural river?
I think so.
Big river.
I think it is a natural river. Yeah.
Maybe the new houses needed to put their sewage in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they might have just kind of dug it out
Yes.
for the sewage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so, but who knows?
Yes. I see.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that's how this is how Lake Huron drains. Yeah. I won't go any more into the geography. So this area has a history more than I could ever know or tell. We have evidence that there have been humans here for like at least 10,000 years. Although again, so part of this area was part of the glaciers. But when the glaciers subsided and kind of melted into Hudson Bay and the Arctic Ocean, there's evidence to suggest that right away there was migrations of many different peoples. Some of which did not necessarily get along, and so
Lake Algonquin, I didn't know about that.
yeah. This is there's a bigger Lake Algonquin's the name of the bigger
It took
lake.
in three of them.
Yes.
Took in three of them.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, there's many examples of that in Canada. Like there's up in Manitoba, there used to be like a lake that was much bigger than any of the Great Lakes today. I'm forgetting what it was called, but it was 5 times the size of Lake Superior or something like that. And so that was only 15,000 years ago. So you can imagine.
So this is 10,000 years ago. Is that what, or less
1914.
maybe? A little bit less.
No, it was
Says
made in 1914.
Oh, the map was.
Yeah, and so.
So the lakes were like that in 1914.
No.
Oh.
The map was made in 1914.
Oh yeah.
No, this is several thousand years ago.
I was wondering. Yeah.
And so, to piece together what we know about the history generally before the arrival of Europeans, generally there are 2 large language families around the Great Lakes before the Europeans. So just like we can tell language families in Asia and Europe, we can also derive language family groups that share similar roots and whatnot with Native American groups. And so one big overarching group is called the Algonquin language family. So you might know some of these names. So you have the Ojibwe, the Crees, Blackfoot, and there's even pockets here where they have the same language family, and on the East Coast there. So that's all part of the Algonquin language. And then the other big group, which maybe we're more familiar with, is the Iroquois. So the Iroquois, as we'll get into, the Iroquois were famous allies of the British for basically as long as the British were around here. And the French were allies with the Algonquins, and then also some parts of the Iroquois, because the Iroquois had a bit of a civil war, which we'll get into. So this is generally the Iroquois language families. Here you have what were known as like the Five Nation Confederacy here in upstate New York. Whereas here you have more independent tribes that were not necessarily associated as much, but share a language family. So within this Huron group, this is a very large group as well, because a lot of these communities were no more than 300 people. Like a lot of these communities stuck very closely with their own. Although they did have agriculture, which Mum was talking about, the 3 sisters, if you wanted to mention anything about that.
Guest speaker.
Squash, beans, corn.
Yes. Yes, so the squash, beans, and corn.
Which grow very well here.
Yeah, and there's evidence to suggest that they were growing it around here too, because famously this area is like some of those fertile agricultural land in the world, like up north of Toronto. Apparently it's extremely rich near Barrie. So they were growing here.
Houses on it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Marsh, yeah.
And so within the Huron here, there were many groups. So that's a general background. That's a larger history. Do you have anything to say about that? I don't think so. Around 1600, the history of this region was about to change, for better or for worse. Obviously, around the second decade of the 17th century, so the 1610s, we have the initial arrival of the French, okay? And early French and early English history in North America is like, honestly, like my specialty at this point. Like, it's extremely interesting. So France, so you can't really see here, because this is a map in the 17th century. They knew very little. So famously, the English established colonies along the Atlantic seaboard. So the English with their kind of private companies created the Virginia Company. The Puritans settled New England, and their population grew quite rapidly from there. Whereas the French had a monopoly on the St. Lawrence River, right along there. But for a long time, they had trouble settling it. So they stuck to just their small little villages in Quebec, which was founded in, I think, the second or third decade of the 17th century. But the English had a really hard time, for a similar reason it was hard to get to Georgian Bay from the St. Lawrence. The English had a very difficult time getting up into the Ohio Valley, into Ontario, because you had the Appalachian Mountains here. And that's very hard to traverse on your own. And to set up a trading system that can bring goods to and from a place in a pre-industrial era is a lot harder than we could ever appreciate. It takes a very long time, which is why after the railroad and industrialization, everything gets a lot faster, everything gets a lot quicker, right? And I think because of that, we can't really appreciate how slow things were. Like it was very difficult for anyone to traverse past that region, not just because there were a lot of hostile native, people that were kind of pushing them back, but also because the geography was extremely harsh.
And the weather.
And the weather, yes, and so. Does anyone know the story of Etienne Brulé?
No.
And maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Brulé.
Brulé, okay, thank you. So you've heard of Etienne Brulé?
Yeah.
Dad used to teach there.
Was that a school?
Yeah.
No way.
Right?
Where is that? Where is the school?
Etobicoke. It was a junior public school.
And so what do you know about the figure of Etienne Brulé?
Very little.
Very little. Okay, so Etienne Brulé was
Hold
born.
on your back, Grandpa.
He was born in 1595 in France. In France. And so this is before Samuel Champlain, again I'm pronouncing it terribly, even came over and founded New France. And so when he was around 20 years old, this is 1615, he decided to, I think I was actually more like 1610, so he came over when he was like 15 or 16. It's a very young lad, but apparently he was quite able, although he's very immature apparently. He was kind of a womanizer supposedly, and as we'll see, a womanizer in far off lands. So when he was around 15, he came to New France and he sort of befriended the older Samuel Champlain, and he immediately said, "Hey, if you let me, I will go and I will explore," because nobody had gone past like Quebec City at that point. Like this was brand new, and so Champlain agreed and gave him enough resources. And the goal of the governor of New France, and the goal at that time was to make initial contact with the peoples that were out there. At that time, they had no idea really the kind of peoples that were out there. So the goal was to meet them and to learn their language and to sort of establish trading relations. Because at this time, the new fashion, so I'm trying to think of the equivalent of today. Is there a fashion trend today? I'm not really in touch, as you might be able to see, with fashion trends today.
Grunge.
The sort of the craze of the maybe grunge. Yeah. The craze of the early 17th century was fur, and this even trends because there was an emerging middle class in Europe at that time, and so it wasn't even just the elites in Europe. It was also this like emerging kind of business owner class wearing furs, and it became very prominent. So right away they wanted to they wanted to kind of see what was happening, with furs and whatnot. So Etienne Bruel gets sent out. He goes down. I'm gonna go all the way back here. He goes down here. He goes to the Ottawa River, and then from here he starts to meet Algonquin people, so certain Algonquin natives, and so he apparently is very gifted at learning language, because when he eventually comes back to Quebec City, he knows like 3 different languages, which is really, if you think about it, like I can barely learn French, then it's like very close to English.
And he looks like he's dressed like an indigenous person.
Yeah, so that's part of the story. So he came all the way there, and he got literally to where we're standing right now. It's actually really remarkable. This actually kind of inspired me to do this history, because it relates so much to this region specifically. He not only got here, but apparently, if I can get the name, because I'm going to get the name wrong there. Let's see. He got, it's a long name, but there's a town right around here. He got there. He actually died.
Oh.
He died in the Bay region. Like right along here. So it's about probably a 40-minute drive from where we are right now, and it's a mystery of why he died. But just to backtrack, so he befriended, and he basically was the people, like the governor and the authorities of France and New France had no idea where he was for like a decade, and actually he didn't write anything down. Actually, I think he was illiterate. He didn't write anything down. So basically, we only have secondhand accounts of him. Samuel Champlain wrote a lot about him, but not always good things. Wrote a lot of like this guy is, apparently he definitely had some, like a few different wives.
Many different children.
He had some, and he also in the 1620s. This is actually something that we don't know. We think that the English, the British at that time, only defeated the French after the 7 Years' War in the mid-18th century to take all of Quebec. It's actually, so in 1629, a privateer working for the English actually conquered Quebec City. So the English conquered Quebec City in 1629, but then at that time, it was very hard at that time to keep a colony operating, and it wasn't really worth much at the time. So the English actually just agreed to give back the colony to France, but in exchange, the English didn't have to pay a dowry to marry the Queen of France, like the Princess of France at the time. So it was like an agreement to like dowry, like no dowry in exchange for like giving up a property in the New World. So anyway, Etienne Bruel, he actually was a double crosser. He was kind of a backstabber. He was working for the English and the French, and so Samuel Champlain found that out, and he did not like that whatsoever. So then Bruel escaped or just fled in some way, came back along here, came back to Georgian Bay. And this is kind of gets into the later history, because the prevailing theory is that he died at the hands of a hostile tribe. And so he was allied with some tribes, but then at that time, there was the emergence of what are called, maybe I have to skip a few times, what are called the Beaver Wars. Has anyone heard of the Beaver Wars?
Beaver?
Well, it's about the hats.
The Beaver Wars. Oh, it isn't
Oh, cute.
It is cute, and we should love the beavers. And for better or for worse, these animals were like fetishized and commercialized on a massive scale for about 300 years.
Yep.
And I actually met a couple trappers when I was living in Atikokan. I met a couple trappers. So there's still small fur trading going on, but it's more of a niche market. At this time, it was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd come back with like 300 canoe loads worth of furs and ship them off to Europe. So anyway,
If you're teaching high school, you're going to get a much different reaction
Yeah, so I'm not teaching high school here. What do you
From
mean?
what you got here.
What do you mean softer? In what way? Explain. What do you mean?
Well, we're just talking about the Beaver Wars.
Yes, exactly.
And
That's the official name generally. But
And the
it's-
and the high school kids, they think that word. And what do they think when they think that word?
I don't think they would know much at all about it. Maybe they think of the fur trade, perhaps.
They know quite a lot about.
But there's
about
details.
beaver.
But there's details that have to be known
Right
about.
about
which we
grade
didn't.
9 or
Okay, that-
8 or
yeah.
9. They
I
start
don't think they
learning
know
around
much.
grade 6.
I think we
No,
should
but I
move
never
on
learned
to
about the Beaver Wars because it's kind of controversial.
Sorry.
Because it gets into sort of the politics that we don't really know a lot
Okay,
about.
so you are perfect at teaching.
Did I say that?
They're not gonna bother. They're not gonna bother you at all.
Wait, I'm not claiming to be perfect.
You did it.
You are perfect.
I haven't even explained the Beaver
No,
Wars.
you're perfect.
So, the Beaver
The
Wars.
Hairy Beaver Wars.
The Beaver Wars. We don't fully know the extent to what was. We don't know much about what was going on in this region before the arrival of the French. Like it's just we don't know a lot. The Iroquois and the Huron tribes could have been fighting like for hundreds of years before, for all we know. There's not that much evidence to suggest either way. What we do know is that after the French came in and started trading with the Hurons up here, furs, the Iroquois down here said, "Oh, this is a pretty lucrative trade, and we would like to monopolize the trade." And so economic history is all about how can we monopolize trade. Like that's if you read about like it's all about like taking over choke points in trading networks and kind of controlling it. And so the same happened with railroads, right? With Rockefeller and all these people, you know, like Vanderbilt's. Like it's all about kind of like monopolizing the means of transportation. Mm-hmm. And so the Iroquois were like, so the Europeans absolutely needed middlemen, native middlemen in order to get from to fro. So the Iroquois, in and around the 1630s and the 1640s, basically committed genocide on the
Hurons.
On the Hurons here. So they came up. Do I have it here? Yeah. Okay. So they came up from New York State, and the English and the Dutch were allied with these Iroquois, and they both. This is kind of gets into the. They both sold them guns.
It was really bad. Yeah.
So the gun again. Guns are actually not new to Europe. The guns have been around for 200 years before Europe at the time. But to them, the guns are way above any sort of weaponry that they were going to be fighting with. So as soon as the Iroquois here got guns, it was inevitable that something bad was going to happen. And then of course after that happens. After one tribe group, nation gets guns, every other nation needs to get guns in order to compete. And so it's this cycle of, it's this cycle of destruction.
Race to the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so the Iroquois aligned with the English basically take over the region and take over the trade. And there's a lot of really interesting history right around here. Has anyone heard of the town of Midland?
Yeah.
Yes.
Midland, yes, So originally I thought it was named that because it's kind of a middle ground between the Shield and where we are right now, more sandy parts. Actually, no, it was the name of a railroad, the Midland Railroad. But it's still it's that way, and it's into a harbor area in like kind of the southeast of Georgian Bay.
Yeah.
So anyone know the Jesuits? Anyone aware of the Jesuits? They're basically a Catholic order.
Yep.
And they were founded in the 1550s, supposedly in response to Protestantism, but I'm sure there were groups like the Jesuits around before then. Mm-hmm. And so the Jesuits came with Samuel Champlain right away from the start, and they after Bruel came into this region, Jesuit missionaries came all the way down, and they actually founded like a Christian schoolhouse in Midland, Ontario in the 1630s, which is really incredible, actually. And so again, the French were allied with these Huron tribes. And so after the Iroquois came and took over a lot of areas around here, around Georgian Bay, the French tried to make this place kind of a sanctuary for their allies, but it kind of failed, and a lot of and the Iroquois. There's a lot of brutal stories you can read of kind of the brutality of the wars. Again, the book that I referenced, the Georgian Bay, the Sixth Great Lake book, it kind of gets into some of it, like, you know, some of it rivals like American techniques in Guantanamo Bay for the torture stuff, but
Can I just mention that this is where Tara Dixon
Yes.
works at the Huron Museum there,
No way!
and always has.
Oh,
Who is Tara Dixon?
John Dixon.
John and
Cousin.
Tara.
Okay, so
She's
John,
got-
okay.
John's our
She's got a
cousin.
very responsible job there,
Wow, okay, in Midland.
and has always worked there.
Oh, well, mate, I'm gonna go
For
take a
years.
trip. Okay, I am taking a trip there soon.
Yeah, but
I am absolutely
what's it
taking a
called?
trip
The
there.
Museum of the
Isn't that
Huron?
Marie in the woods or something like that?
No,
Yeah, Marie's.
Isn't there something like that?
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah.
Saint Marie.
Anyway,
or-
sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, then I like all this.
I
I'm
thought
going.
you'd like to
I'm
know.
going
The
to visit.
Hurons, right.
I'm going to visit very soon, and yeah, and so just as the like again, when you're looking at North American wars in Canadian history and American history, you got to look at what's happening in Europe, because a lot of the time the conflict is related. And so from 1629 to 1633, right at the beginning of the Beaver Wars, there's what's called the Anglo-French War, which is a huge war over, like, basically all, like, you know, in the different trade routes in the Atlantic Ocean, and then also Nova Scotia and Newfoundland were fought over in the early colonial days as well during the Anglo-French War. And again, it ended because the French princess Henrietta Maria, who has an island named after her in Hudson's Bay, she married King Charles, and King Charles would later be killed in the Cromwellian Revolution. I don't know if you know Oliver Cromwell in 1640. And so there's a ton going on in England. And so this should tell you, like, if you ask, like, why did it take so long for this region to be settled by Europeans? Well, it's partly because there's so much conflict. A, there's so much conflict going on in Europe. B, the geography is brutal. C, there's a lot of hostile peoples trying to defend their own land here as well. And so, yeah, there's just a ton of history. And so the fur trade is, again, so fascinating. Has anyone heard of, I'm going to pronounce names wrong, Radisson and Groseilliers?
Yeah.
Radisson,
Radisson Groseilliers.
Groseilliers and Radisson. I absolutely need to learn
Is that
French.
right, Mark?
Pronunciation.
Huh?
Grossai.
I don't know the Versailles.
Oh,
so they were
okay, I'm wrong.
so the two of them were a big dynamic duo in the French Empire,
Yeah.
or like in New France in Quebec, and
Yeah.
they started out and they were born in France, and they started out working for the French, but again, just like Bruel, they had the English in one ear and the French in another ear. You'll find a lot of the Courrier du Bois meaning like kind of the free fur traders. A lot of them have no loyalty to their nationality, to their empire whatsoever. They're kind of privateers, pirates in a way, and so they go farther than anyone had ever gone before. In 1661, they pitched to the French king at the time and the advisors, because at this time in France, do you know King Louis XIV? King Louis XIV was like the Sun King. He reigned for 72 years. He had like just an elaborate court around him. It was crazy. So they tried to lobby the French advisors to the king about getting some money to go out and explore, try to find the Northwest, and try to find the Pacific Ocean potentially. But they said no. So the governor of New France at the time said, you can go, but you have to take along 2 of our people with you, and you have to split more of the profits with them. So what ended up happening is that in 1661, they left in the middle of the night with a bunch of supplies that they stole. And they just left in the middle of the night, down the St. Lawrence, down to the Ottawa. And their goal was to they wanted to find Hudson's Bay, and they wanted to find the Northwest Passage, like was a lot of people's goal at the time. And so they ended up just completely going AWOL and kind of abandoning the governor. Then they were wildly successful. So they met with the Huron, and the Huron showed them all the way to they got all the way to the Mississippi River, and they got close to the Hudson's Bay. They did both. And at the time, there's all these legend tales about how they had to fight, had to fight and kind of try to avoid the Iroquois who were still attacking at that time. Because the Beaver Wars are a long period of time. It's not just one war. It's the name for many different wars. And so they eventually come back to New France, and they come back, well, because it's the only route that they could take, because Quebec City's right there. They come back with 300 canoes full of fur. So they have a whole bunch of Hurons with them, carrying 300 boats of fur. And at the time, Quebec City is struggling. They're like financially, and it's kind of a wreck. And at the time, and so they thought like, okay, they're going to be fine if we bring them a bunch of this fur, and the governor will forget what we did 2 years earlier. Well, no, they were actually arrested when they got there. So they brought in all this fur, and they got none of the profits, and all the fur was just taken by the governor, and they were arrested.
How did they die?
So they didn't die there. So they were only arrested for I think a few weeks or a few months. After that, they left. This is kind of getting off track a little bit, but they left the colony, and they started working for the English, and they were the ones who found Hudson's Bay, and that's why the Hudson's Bay Company was founded in 1670.
And they had all the skills.
They had all the skills, and and more importantly,
Contact.
They had all the contacts, which was and they knew the languages, which was absolutely essential.
Absolutely.
The English did not have. The English were more like, in the Virginia colony and in the Puritan areas in the Northeast. They weren't, to my knowledge, they weren't so quick to learn languages as well. They over time they definitely did, but the French right away seemed to have that advantage. And it's just really interesting how the French allied with the Hurons, connected to the Georgian Bay, and the English were allied with the Iroquois, because both of them are fighting for their territory. Both of those native groups are fighting each other for their territory, as the English and French are fighting for their territory. So, anyway, a few years, it is really super fascinating.
Yeah.
So a few years after that, these guys who were French, they worked for the English, and they found Hudson's Bay in service of the King of England. So anyway, this is a general route to the northwest. Like I said, it takes a long time for expansion to happen, and so for a long time, until the mid-18th century, so for like 100 years, from the mid-17th to the mid-18th, the English and the French borders are relatively stationary and stagnated in North America. It isn't until around the 7 years. Have anyone heard of the 7 Years' War?
Yeah.
7 years. What was the 7 Years' War? Anyone know anything
I
about it?
have no idea.
England and France.
England and France. So England controls the Hudson's Bay in the north, and the colonies, which were still the colonies. So this is 1756. Okay. Obviously, we know the date 1776. That's the American Revolution. So this is 19 years before the American Revolution. The French have a problem because the French have settled in Quebec City and settled Montreal and like little forts along the southern Ontario coast, and then Michigan, and then down into the Mississippi River, what would later be called the Louisiana Territory, like down into there. So they've settled that, but all their settlements are very scarce with people. It's all based on the fur trade. They don't develop their industries much past that, the French. And so the fur trade, famously, when you read the economic history of Canada, the fur trade does not encourage settlement. It encourages transitory movements of people. Whereas the English were found in colonies where they were growing tobacco, where they were growing cotton and bringing over a lot of people to grow cotton, right? And so they had a population that was much, much larger. At the time of the 7 Years' War, the population of New England and all along the Atlantic seaboard was 1.5 million people. The population of New France was 70,000. So So the English had a very, very dominant advantage, and there's many reasons for this. So the 7 Years' War is a... Oh, did I miss that slide? I guess I did. Yeah, so the 7 Years' War is a battle between the French and the British, and the British being allied with the Iroquois, and the French being allied with the Huron peoples. The Huron peoples had faced a lot more trouble than the Iroquois. So the Iroquois were much stronger in numbers than the Huron at this time. Again, there was disease and genocide. I mean, both sides had disease, but there was definitely
That
previous
massacre
wars.
mainly
The massacre played a big
in
role.
this area. That massacre.
Was, yeah, exactly. So the British win. The British win the 7 Years' War, and basically only a few years after that, the American Revolution happens. After the colonies sort of realize that, like, hey, we no longer have this common enemy with the French, they start to realize, like, hey, maybe the real enemy is the English crown. So they rebel, and then again, that's sort of a history beyond this region.
Story.
Yeah, exactly. It's a whole other story. So I think I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. We had the American Revolution. The American Revolution takes people that are loyal, like it forces people that are loyal to the crown still in the American colonies. It forces them to travel northwards, and a lot of them, they're called the United Empire Loyalists. A lot of them will come north through New York State and then up, and within the 1780s and 90s decade, will settle towns like Kingston, towns like what was called York, now Toronto, towns like Dundas, towns like Ancaster, all along here, towns like Bytown, which is now Ottawa. And so, to get back to Georgian Bay, does anyone know who this person is?
Alexander Hamilton?
No, and it looks kind of like Alexander Hamilton. Maybe comes
Brock?
from a similar family. No, Brock fought in the War of 1812. This is the 1790s. Brock would have been a young boy at this time.
Okay.
So this is John Graves Simcoe.
Oh!
John Graves Simcoe was
Yeah.
was the first governor of Upper Canada. So the British take over the region, the whole Quebec territory from the French, and originally they called the province of Quebec, but then they soon realized after the American Revolution that we don't want the English and the French to be under the same government. There's too much chaos, and you can still see that today. There's too much chaos, and so we're going to separate the territories. So everything west of the Ottawa River was to become Ontario, and east was Quebec. Right? So John Graves Simcoe is the first governor of Upper Canada. In 1791, that's when it happened, okay? So John Graves Simcoe says, okay, we're worried the Americans are going to come from Michigan into Georgian Bay and attack from the north. So here they would have been worried that they'd come all the way around, come to where we are now, and then kind of come try to take over, into Ontario and Quebec from this region. So John Graves Simcoe says, maybe we should build a road from York, Toronto, to Georgian Bay. So, does anyone know what this street is called?
Young Street.
Yonge Street. So, Mom, you used to tell me growing up that Yonge Street was like the longest street in the world. Apparently, that's false.
I didn't say world.
I think you
In
did.
Ontario.
Yeah.
So, it's all about classification. So, apparently, Yonge Street is actually not that long because it intersects with a highway. I mean, it intersects. The entire road, if you look at it as a complete network, is a very long road, and it runs into Lake Simcoe, or close to Lake Simcoe, around there. But it's not the longest road in the world. Maybe you didn't tell me that, but I have a memory of you saying that it was the longest road ever.
Well, that's what I
Ontario.
thought.
I thought Ontario.
Yeah, something like that.
World's a bit much. But.
Yes. Anyway, it's a legendary road, and I like the angle of this picture. It's really cool to see that like population centers are still along Yonge Street there. Like here's North York, and there's Toronto. So you go all the way down.
So what's the highway then if it goes all the way to Simcoe?
I think Highway 11, or let me just see.
Trans-Canada.
No, Trans-Canada is no.
Is it 11?
Not 11?
Trans-Canada isn't.
Okay.
I think it's the 11.
Okay.
I think you're right.
No, whatever the number of Yonge Street is, whatever that number is.
Or
One, isn't it?
3.
Yeah. So Simcoe builds this road partially because he worried about invasion, partially because the Northwest Company was pushing for it. You know, so you say Alexander Mackenzie?
And, yeah.
Well, Alexander Hamilton was an American. He was he was an
Well, he was
American.
a United Empire Loyalist, yeah.
Maybe you're thinking of a different Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was
Oh.
one of the founding fathers of America. He was famous for being part of the Federalist Party in America. He wanted to found a central bank, but then he had a duel with Aaron Burr famously and
Yeah.
died that way. But no, this is Alexander Mackenzie was a big player in the Northwest Company, which was rivals with Hudson's Bay, and famously they were run by a bunch of Scots. So the Scots and the French ran the Northwest Company, whereas the British Empire ran the Hudson's Bay Company more tightly.
Yeah.
And so eventually it merged. But so John Gray Simcoe, he builds this road up into Georgian Bay, and then they build a road from Simcoe to Georgian Bay, so it connects Toronto, York to.
And it's Highway 1, so
Is
that
it
makes
Highway
sense.
1.
That
Oh, is
does
it?
make sense.
Is it?
That does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so then his fear half came to fruition, in the sense that the Americans and the British did go to war in a couple decades, the War of 1812. They fought, but not along Georgian Bay. This was like the proposed, like so Simcoe and others were hoping to defend, like get up here to like really fortify this entire area along to create a complete barrier to the Americans, because the Americans controlled Michigan. But it didn't happen. The Americans had very, very little transportation networks at this time to Michigan. At this time, like, they have the exact same troubles as we do, you know, in terms of building roads, building canals, building transportation networks. So basically the fronts of the American Revolution were here, Niagara, Detroit, and along Lake Ontario here, Kingston there. But
Why
no
wouldn't they
Georgian
go
Bay.
up Lake Michigan? Why wouldn't the Americans just go up Lake Michigan?
Because a lot of this area hadn't been fully developed. Like the transportation networks had not been fully developed.
It's
yet.
like so far inland from the
It was
coast.
still new.
Exactly, and the Appalachian Mountains are still a huge barrier.
But
at this
wouldn't
time.
that, if they knew about that?
They knew about it, but in order to attack, you need to have a military that's well fed, and you know has good communications with each other, and that takes a lot of energy and a lot of resources.
Why
that
is
the
it
Americans
now
didn't
then
have at the
that
time.
they own half of Lake Michigan?
Well, because the America increasingly in the early 19th century. Yeah. The Americans did always lay a claim here,
Oh.
but they just didn't develop the transportation networks very well,
Oh, I see.
and so they couldn't actually create a very good presence
Oh, okay.
and create a viable threat.
Yeah.
Well, they did. Simcoe and others were worried about it, but they weren't sure if the Americans had that in
Yeah.
them, and they ended up not, which is probably for the best.
They own half of Lake Huron too.
They owned half
Yes.
of
Yeah,
every
that's
Great
right
Lake
through
except
Huron.
And right through the Erie.
they own half of every Great Lake
Half
except if
of
you
it,
count
except
Georgian Bay as a
Ontario.
lake. If you count
Yeah.
Georgian Bay as a lake, Canada has all of it.
Oh, I like it.
But,
That's a good
but-
closer.
Yes,
Don't they control all of Michigan?
That is.
they do. They control Lake Michigan.
And so today we conclude.
Ooh.
So at this time, this area is very scarcely settled. There are still a lot of Huron. There are still a lot of different peoples around here. At the time, the early 19th century, there was a lot of treaties being made between the British and Huron people. So eventually, after the War of 1812, there was a sort of an end to the old Native alliance system. So after the War of 1812, there was an effort to make treaties with the old Native enemies, because the British were trying to more uniformly and sort of politely colonize and the Canada, and so in where is it? Yeah, so in 1818, you can barely see it. In 1818, funnily enough, you get Treaty 18, which is where we are right now. Treaty 18 here. It's called the Nottawasaga Purchase, and so the British promised to give a sum like a 1,200 pound sum every year for like many, many years, for in exchange of like this territory, and there were certain reserves set up in this area here.
So
But
that's not, so the Hurons got wiped out, right?
not completely, no. So the Huron,
Well, I know not completely.
so the Hurons fled. The Hurons fled the region completely.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're talking about after that.
We're talking about after the French were defeated and after the
Right,
Americans.
so, okay, so the Hurons,
Yeah.
some of them went to Quebec City, 300 of them.
Yes. Yes.
And then the rest of them went south to Ohio.
Ohio, and then even as far as like the American South, like in Oklahoma. There is a Huron descendant people in Oklahoma. They have a huge reserve in Oklahoma.
kinda
at the
cool,
time.
right?
Yeah.
It is kind of cool.
That group that was supposed to be completely decimated.
Because
Right.
the British settled them there before the American Revolution. After the 7 Years' War, the British settled them there. So then the Americans revolted and the reserve remained. It's called the Wyandot Reserve, I think, and it's massive.
Wyan.
The Wyan Reserve.
Yeah, Wyandot, I think
The
it's something
Wyandot.
like that.
The Wyandot. And there's a lot of them. I think that might be the biggest.
And that's the same in Quebec, they're called Wyandago or
Yes.
something like that.
Yes.
Wendigo.
Is that it?
I think
Wendigo,
that
yeah.
maybe is it.
But it's funny because their homeland. Well, we don't really know. We don't really know how long they were there. Because the thing is, like, before the industrial age, it was a lot easier for tribes and groups to just get up and migrate to different places, right? Like, because there weren't as many like fixed assets in the ground. Like, you didn't have like a factory or like large scale infrastructure that you needed to maintain an area. So a lot of the Huron people would, have a base there, and then after a certain amount of years would go travel somewhere else, right? And you might have only a certain groups of people travel, and after a while, those groups that left a century ago are kind of their own people, and it was more of a fluid society in that way. So we don't know how long and what groups were really here for, but we do know that it was inhabited by humans for basically as long as it wasn't ice. So anyway, so it's post the War of 1812. 1815, this is after the Napoleonic Wars in Europe and after the War of 1812 here. There is an explosion in British settlement of Canada. So the British start bringing in a ton of Scotsmen, a ton of Irishmen, and English as well. And the numbers are truly gargantuan, like in comparison to what it was beforehand. And this is partly, do I have something here? Yes, I do. This is partly to do with what historians call population pressures. And so the Industrial Revolution, not only did it make people wealthier, but it also, in doing so, it also increased the food supply a great deal. And when you increase the food supply, you increase the amount of people that can survive. And medicine is also increasing at this time. And so, increasingly so, there is an explosion of population on the British Isles. So from 1750 to 1820, I don't know the exact statistics, but it's very possible that Britain quadrupled in their population. Like, it was probably not quadrupled, but it exploded. And so historians talk about when a population increases in a certain area at a certain time, it's almost inevitable that there will be break-off groups that leave and try to settle other places. It happened with the Vikings, it happened with the Islamic caliphates, it happened in the Roman Empire, it's happened throughout history. It's probably happened to the Iroquois and other peoples.
The British probably promised them free land and free, so they probably
did.
said, if you'll get on the boats, we'll give you land.
If you get on the boats and you promise to settle the land, because settling land is very difficult. You gotta clear it, you gotta build on it, and you gotta start producing things on it. So the British said you can literally have land in York, on Lake Huron,
Right
all these
here.
different places, right here.
Yeah.
You can have land for free, but you got to start producing this amount of wheat in 3 years. And if you don't do that, the British government and the financiers backing them can just take it over. And so it was free, but you had to be a good farmer. And we have some of that in our history too, with Saskatchewan as well, with the free land in Saskatchewan too. But that was 100 years after. And in the New West, on the prairies.
Was it free land though? Because I think
Was it not?
your grandparents or whatever came over for health, partly for health reasons. Partly for,
so did
not
they.
because they gave them land. I don't think they did they?
And it was so
They were
minimal.
homesteaders.
It was what?
So minimal, 100 acres or.
Oh, okay, so it
They
was
were
something.
homesteaders.
$500 or
Well,
$200.
It's analogous to this situation because a lot of these people would have come for health reasons too. England was a smokestack in the early 19th century. It was the only industrial power. It had brought about the Industrial Revolution, and people were like the whole point is that this region the first inklings of this region started to be settled in the 1820s, 1830s. That's when a lot of the surveying happened. So surveying was an important step in the early days of settling any place. You got to see if it's suitable for growing certain crops and for human habitation in general. And so the 1840s is when you get the establishment of the smallest towns around here. So I believe Owen Sound and Collingwood and some of those bigger and Midland are the first settlements there are in the 1840s. Whereas Toronto, Dundas along Lake Ontario was the 1790s. It took about 50 years for that settlement to go up into this area.
And Meaford was 1755 with Brulé.
Ah, neat.
Well,
Right?
Breuil
Really?
came in the
Really?
early 17th century in the 1620s.
So 1620.
So this is about
Meaford happened.
200 years. No, Meaford wasn't a town. Meaford is not in the
Okay,
picture.
some-
There's no town around here.
Here.
There are longhouses and there are Huron longhouses at the
Right,
time.
yeah.
But the British are not anywhere close to here 200 years before this time. The British are scattered along the Atlantic seaboard, so the Virginia colony and New England.
Yeah.
So right around this time, we get maybe the most important invention of the Industrial Revolution, which is the railroad. The railroad not completely, but did a lot to eliminate the constraints of travel. So the first railroad that goes from one city to another city, so it connects two cities. Does anyone know what the first railroad ever built that
We
connected
can
two
see
cities?
it.
Well, but you don't know. Can you read it?
Is that Collingwood?
Liverpool and Manchester.
You can read it. So Liverpool and Manchester.
Oh,
with
you mean in England?
It was the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, and this was 1830. In 1830, the Liverpool and Manchester were connected. So this is right around the time that a lot of people are migrating into this area, into Canada, Upper Canada in general, and specifically into this area we are right now.
That's in Britain,
And
though.
this is in Britain, yes. So this is I'm trying to set a context. So the point is that almost immediately. Well, I put this picture also. Does anyone know the story? I'm going on a bit of a tangent. Does anyone know the story of of this day? So the person that was leading all the advertising campaigns and was really who I think had a part ownership stake in the Liverpool Manchester Railway. I forget his name in the top of my head, but he was so happy on this grand day of the railway opening. He tried to jump off the rail, he was excited, was talking to people, and then somehow his leg got caught on the adjacent railway, and then the railway coming in ran over it, and he died. So this is kind of the mixed emotions of the very first railway day in human history. It was pretty incredible.
But it's good they didn't paint the leg in and all that with the picture.
Oh, but there are paintings of that.
Well, I'm sure they do.
But so maybe it's a sign from God saying hey, this industrial age you're trying to do, it's gonna cause some pain. It's not all gonna be
For
easy.
sure, trains.
It's a sign. Yeah, it's
an omen.
It's an omen.
Well, it's kind of a teaching tool too.
It's a
because,
teaching tool.
They tell kids not to jump off the train and
That's
don't
right.
play around
Yes.
around those rails.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they still do today. I mean, I like
Play
playing
on the
with some
track.
rails.
They
So
probably had boots on and they couldn't get them undone fast
yeah,
enough.
no.
Can you imagine?
It's a weird. I've tried reading that story. What happened? I still don't understand logistically how
What
it happened.
story?
The story of how he got ran
Got your
over.
car-
I don't
Oh.
understand. I don't quite get it, but
I think
you can
a
read
boot
about it.
was
It's,
good.
Well, it was a it was a very special day, and I'm sure that he might have been having maybe a little liqueur,
Maybe there was some liquor
quite
involved.
possibly, and
Yeah,
Yeah,
his foot caught in the railway
Oh my
stairs.
God.
perhaps.
that's right.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
So the point is almost so the word of the rail, just people were going crazy. It was like, we gotta build this everywhere. Like this is gonna be able to send, you know, my lumber or my wheat or everything. This is gonna, like a quarter of the cost and so much quicker. And people were going mad. And the travel, being able to travel as well, like human beings being able to move.
Yeah.
And so immediately there was a railway proposed from from Toronto up to Lake Huron, Georgian Bay, but also from Port Hope and those kind of adjacent towns in Lake Huron. And do I have it here? This kind of gets me to a really interesting point that I just wanted to kind of mull over here. And maybe you guys would have kind of caught the last vestiges of it, but I don't think we can understand how intense local rivalries were at this time over business and trade. So at the time, Port Hope and Cobourg, do you know Port Hope and Cobourg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They in the 1840s, they both wanted to build a railroad from Lake Ontario, from their city, to Georgian Bay. And they were fighting each other. There were actual fights going on over it. Their mayors hated each other. Like it was the local rivalry from Cobourg to Port Hope. There's books written about it. It was extremely intense. And I think with like one of the things about globalization we don't talk about is like I think globalization has sort of distilled these local rivalries because no longer are you competing against your local town for production. You're now competing against like China and like way over there. So it kind of takes away some of the sting and some of the kind of the pure brutality of the local rivalries. You can see that as a good thing. Like we're more united, I guess now. But there was kind of a fun element of that.
Well, and that's like the modern day deglobalization with the United States, and now it's a little prickly with them too, right?
Well, exactly.
So that's like almost bringing that more local intenseness back.
It's certainly between Canada because America wants to decouple from Canada in a way, and we're like, what the heck? Like we were a good trading partner.
Yeah, so I wonder if that will like continue on with interprovincial competitiveness or anything
Yes.
else. I don't know.
Exactly.